Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I haven't still got the gong. In any event, I really don't need the gong. Thank you very much. I want to welcome you all. First of all, I want to welcome the members, and I want to welcome the observers and the media who are here today. And I also want to welcome all those who are joining us online and on RTE News Now on this, the fifth and final weekend meeting in relation to the Eighth Amendment. Our work programme this weekend will take a very different structure to our previous meetings as we gather to make our recommendations as we see fit on the topic of the Eighth Amendment. Before the Secretariat and I take you through today's work programme, I believe it is appropriate that we take a moment to pause and reflect on our work to date and the task ahead of us this weekend. When we all came together for the first meeting in November, it was clear to me that within the room there was a wide range of experiences, opinions and ideas on the Eighth Amendment, a topic that has at times convulsed the nation. And I doubt that there were many among us who were not in some way daunted by the task ahead of us. I include myself in that, needless to say. This is one of the most complex and contentious subjects in Irish society, and we could not but feel the weight on our shoulders. And I again include myself in that. And yet, by participating in the Assembly, we have been afforded a unique opportunity, as this exercise in deliberative democracy has allowed us to withdraw from the polarising perspectives and begin first and foremost with the facts. The process we followed saw us begin with facts and divest ourselves of opinion. Consequently, we did not follow the more familiar path on this topic, where equal time is provided to each side of the argument, although, as you know, we did in the case on the last weekend when we heard the advocacy groups. We maintained balance on that occasion. The process we followed, I believe, has contributed greatly to the standard of information that we have received on this topic. We also listened carefully to your feedback, and our work programme evolved with your valuable inputs, and I'm sure you appreciated that. Indeed, since the first weekend, I have observed that you listen, engage, and challenge some of the most experienced medical, legal, and ethical experts and advocates on the subject. I have watched as you have engaged with some of the most complex pieces of legislation, immersed yourselves in medical and ethical discourse, and listened with respect to the voices and opinions of others. Your overall commitment to this process has continually provided the Secretariat and me with much encouragement, and I say that genuinely. Given the level of commitment you have shown to date, I have no doubt that you will show equal commitment to the task ahead of us this weekend. Now, what is the task? In absolute terms, it is to make recommendations, and I want to emphasise that. It is to make recommendations as we see fit to the Houses of the Oireachtas on the topic of the Eighth Amendment. There are very few people who will have the breadth of knowledge you have on this topic after our previous weekend sessions, and you have an opportunity to bring this knowledge and your understanding of it to our elected representatives. These recommendations will be made primarily through a balloted vote. It is important that when you vote, you do so with your own conscience and with confidence and conviction. We must all be satisfied that the recommendations once made are a fair representation of the work of the Assembly. Now, I want to say something about the weekend work programme. I'm going to describe it in very broad terms at this stage. At the end of the March meeting of the Assembly, you were invited to make comments and preliminary suggestions on the types of issues you thought should be voted upon or included on a ballot paper for the final weekend. Comments and suggestions could refer to legal avenues, and or aspects of the substantive issue. The Secretariat collated these suggestions, and this informed the preparation of the draft ballot paper, which we circulated to you before Easter. This work was led by me, with the assistance of the Secretariat and the members of the steering group, with whom we met twice for input, and most importantly, with the assistance of the expert advisory group, with whom we conferred weekly, actually. And we spent a long number of hours. I was tempted, in fact, I asked Sharon, how many hours did we spend on the ballot paper? And it was a lot of time, maybe 15 hours, perhaps, yeah. As Assembly members, you know well the complexities of the 8th Amendment as a piece of law, and this is reflected in the draft ballot you received before Easter. It is complex. Significant time and effort was given to preparing and structuring the ballot, a ballot that is legally robust, affords you all the opportunity for real input, and importantly, provides us with enough information to make real and substantial recommendations to the Houses of the Oireachtas. The ballot paper has, by necessity, more than one question, and it is sequential in nature, meaning that later ballots are dependent on the outcome of earlier ballots. Likewise, depending on the votes on earlier questions, not all later questions in the ballot paper may be reached. Now, what you have before you at the moment is a draft, and I emphasize that, a draft ballot paper, and it remains a draft ballot paper. As our agenda for the weekend reflects, we have allocated plenty of time for your questions, for discussion, and for agreeing on the wording of each individual ballot before we vote. To assist in this regard, and indeed to provide you with legal and medical or legal information or legal clarification, we will benefit from the expertise of the expert advisory group, whom you all know well, and whom I'll introduce again later. Their role, and I want to emphasize this, will be to answer questions on specific issues related to the ballot paper. Now, I emphasize that, related to the ballot paper, rather than on a wider range of questions about the content the citizens have heard over the previous 4 weekends. So bear that in mind. The questions relate to specific issues in relation to the ballot paper. Further to this, if you, the members, wish to raise issues or suggest changes, it may be necessary for me to adjourn briefly to reflect on the suggested amendments. Any suggested amendments may be incorporated by agreement following this consideration, though we must remain mindful of the inconsistencies which may be given rise to in other parts of the ballot paper, and that is very important. The Secretariat, the Expert Advisory Group, and myself, we've been, as I've said, we have put an awful lot of work into this, and we are fully conscious of the risk of inconsistencies, and you have to bear that in mind. Before your discussions on each ballot paper, I will provide you with a detailed explanation of the format and wording of each. This explanation will also provide detail on how the results of each draft ballot will be presented and what constitutes a majority vote in each case. Now, voting. I've had a private session with the members, but and they are fully aware and have noted this. But as you can see, as everybody can see, we have voting booths in the room this weekend. The voting booth and the secret ballot are fundamental symbols and tenets of democracy. And about this, I have enlisted the expertise of the retired returning officer for County Dublin, John Fitzpatrick, and his team, who are with us and they're sitting over there, who will provide independent oversight for the process. I must at this point take the opportunity to thank John and his team for all their assistance to date, which has been invaluable, and I mean that, it has been invaluable. Voting will be done in secret. Members will register for and collect the final agreed ballot and will move to cast their vote in the booth. Completed ballot papers will then be placed in ballot boxes. Mr. Fitzpatrick and his team will also be responsible for the counting of the ballot papers and the accurate presentation of the results. So our whole objective is to be to produce an accurate result. Now, in relation to the announcements of the results, it is intended that the results of each ballot will be announced as soon as the votes have been counted and verified. I will announce the result in public session, and depending on the outcome, there may be a multiple of votes over the weekend. I will, in the interest of absolute openness and transparency, be providing the votes in absolute terms, in other words, in numbers, as well as in percentage terms. Now, I just wanted to speak about something which I've variously been calling miscellaneous recommendations and ancillary recommendations. And the votes will form the recommendation that go to the Houses of the Oireachtas. However, in your feedback at our last meeting, many of you indicated that you would like to see wider policy issues as distinct from just legal changes reflected in the recommendations of the Assembly. I am strongly of the view that you have an almost uniquely comprehensive understanding of this topic, and it is important that we capture these ancillary recommendations. Therefore, we will circulate a response form for you to fill in, and any emerging consensus themes or issues which emerge from your response to that form will be included as recommendations in the final report. For those watching the Assembly online or on RTE Now, thank you for your continued engagement with the Assembly. You may be interested to note that a full agenda for the weekend is available to view online, though it is subject to possible changes in times and all of that, depending how things pan out. All the background papers, presentations and draft ballots prepared for the Assembly will become available on our website throughout the course of the weekend. Likewise, all material that is given to members, including a synopsis of each of the meetings to date, is also available to the public on our website, and that's www.citizensassembly.ie. Now, in the interests of openness and transparency, we are conducting as much of this weekend's proceedings, including the voting, in public. Each member, of course, and it's hardly necessary to say this, each member will, of course, vote in secrecy and anonymously in the booths. Now, the next heading I have on this paper is conclusion. And I must preface my remarks by advising that you will be hearing an awful lot more from me before the day is out and before the weekend is out. So that is the context in which I go on to talk about conclusion. Finally, and in conclusion, let me thank you for your work to date. You have contributed to raising the level of discourse on this subject, and you have shown the inherent value in respect of differing views or opinions. Let us continue in this spirit of collegiality for the remainder of the weekend. I would now like to call on Sharon Finnegan, the Secretary to the Assembly, to present the proposed structure of the ballot paper. And this will be on screen, and this is very, very important. This will give you an understanding of where we're going, and I would ask you to really concentrate on this. Thank you very much.